Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Wellness Wave, a podcast that aims to promote psychological knowledge, especially among young people, by featuring interviews to professionals, counselors, and individuals with unique insights on mental health. I am Lillian Chan, a student from Hong Kong International School, and I am with Purvi Bidasaria, an art psychotherapist um, the in Thai Hua Kwan Moral Charities in Singapore.
Ian, thank you for having me.
Thank you for accepting our invitation to be one of our interviewees. We're excited to hear and learn further psychological insights from you. Your expertise and knowledge will definitely inspire those viewers interested in psychology and its aspects. To start, I would like to know what led you to pursue and be interested in exploring art therapy? Has this been something that slowly grew over the years based on a specific experience?
Um, that's a really good question. So yes, earlier I used to do art management when I lived back in the States. And while I was doing art management, actually had partnered up with the Barack and Michelle Obama Academy in Atlanta for a nonprofit project with something called the Freedom Projects back then. And I was working with the school for mainly underprivileged children. And we were working on a ton of art projects over there. And what I noticed was there was a huge shift in mood. So there was a lot of positive mood, like less aggression because of engagement with art. I think that really got me interested in the field enough to like find out more about it. Um, and then I moved back to India in a couple of years. And I think the entire idea of art therapy still stayed with me. And I was definitely curious about it. And I actually reached out to an art therapist to be my personal therapist to just see if it really was something that was a right fit for me to just explore for myself. I don't think at that point I was thinking of being a practitioner. And then COVID happened. And that's when I was like, I love going to like for my own therapy, going to art therapy. I'm very, very interested in the field. And I think I was leaning towards pursuing something in psychology at that point. And it just seemed like art psychotherapy would be the perfect fit for my career ahead. And yeah, that's how kind of like the trajectory of how it went.
Can you walk us through what a day is like in your field as an art therapist?
So I think for each art therapist, anybody in my field, I think our days are so different because I mean, you have each individual is different, and depending on the client that's coming in, um, each hour I would say looks very different for me. But generally, when I get to work, because I do work with a charity and I work with their disability services, and what that means is I mainly work with people with intellectual disabilities at present. Um, I go in and I already have my clients booked out for the day. And I think it's a lot of assessing what's happening in session, being present there for my clients, and then when they leave, also reflecting on what's happened in session, and also looking at my own counter transference and what's going on. As an art therapist, I also practice something called response art quite seriously. Um, Response art is something that we do maybe while the client is there or after they've left. And you can think of it as a self-care tool, but also a way for us to check on our counter transferences that we might have towards a client and what's happening in session. And I think just looking at my own art, what the client's art is, kind of gives me a glimpse into something that I might be feeling or something that's coming up for me itself, or maybe even for the client. Um, yeah, but I think each day, to answer your question, is very different. But I do end up seeing at least four individual clients a day. And at times, I also run groups, so closed groups and open studios, depending on the need.
What do you think are the misconceptions of being an art therapist?
You know, that's such an interesting question, and it's something that's talked about very often in our field. Um, just because I know there's so many people who maybe do certification courses or workshops or almost like wine and pain to unwind. And they think that that's what art therapy is. Actually, art therapy is a profession that's deeply rooted in neuroscience and psychology. Um, you need a bachelor's and a master's and a licensure to be able to practice as an art psychotherapist. And art therapy is actually practiced on a spectrum. And when I say the word spectrum, it means that on one side of art therapy, it is practicing art just for your well being. And on the other side is, on the right side of it, is the very like deeply rooted psychological side, which is more psychotherapeutic, which is based in Jungian psychology. And, they're both, and as art therapists, we practice throughout that spectrum. So earlier I was mentioning to you that maybe at times I go in and I do something called open studios. And those are spaces where my clients, or earlier when I used to work at the hospital, people would just come in, maybe family members or clients, to unwind and create art. But then when I see clients individually or maybe in a close group for art therapy, the material that is discussed, everything that happens in the room is confidential. Um, it is psychotherapy, and one of the mediums that we use to connect is art making. So I think that would be the biggest misconception is what an art therapist does or what it entails. And often we have people who come in who are like, oh, like, will I feel relaxed after? And like every therapy session, you might not feel relaxed after. Like there might be really heavy things that come up. And it's all about the process and how, we help you kind of make realizations, reflect, grow. I think there's a lot to it that I think people are finally like becoming aware of. Yeah.
So how do you see art as a therapeutic instrument compared to traditional verbal therapy? In what area do you think art profoundly impacts an individual and can externalize emotions that are challenging to articulate verbally?
Um, art, almost the way we see it, is the third person in the room, or it's called a triangular relationship in art therapy. Um, just because it gives the client a different medium to first process what's happening to them in, because it's all about the process of art making, and maybe even sitting with that image. Because let's say if you're really distressed or you end up making an image, right? You've kind of maybe put in some of that distress into the art, but then later on, you and the therapist can actually distance yourself from that artwork that you've made about that certain distress. So it's separate to you in that moment, and then analyze it or reflect on it. So I think just art as a tool in itself, or like the art making process in itself, has so many benefits. And each art material actually has their own property, from rigid to fluid, and they'll be used for their quality and the amount of quantity for certain purposes. So, for example, something very uncontrollable like paint or finger paint will be used for certain purposes compared to something more rigid like clay, which needs a lot of pressure and is kinesthetic. So, when I think of the word art as a therapeutic tool, I think of materials, the processes that go behind art making, and sometimes even the art product. Yeah. So I think in art therapy, all of it is very important, and it almost becomes like a third person in the room that the therapist and the client both dialogue with and engage with. I think art therapy is already making an impact in the sense that it gives people a different tool to express themselves with. So I think even practitioners who maybe aren't trained in art therapy, but then seek out psychologists or psychotherapists or even social workers, actually, at least in Singapore, who seek out some kind of certification in art therapy, are maybe able to use art as a therapeutic tool, not as an art therapist where they're using it in the more psychotherapeutic side, but they are able to offer consciously and ethically art as a tool to truly help the client maybe regulate in that moment, or to give the clients another form of expression. And I think art therapy, yeah, I definitely do see a ripple effect of like how hospitals and schools are now trying to engage more with creative art therapists just for the profound positive effects that it can have.
Okay. Um,
Yeah.
what what are some of your experiences when working with individuals who may have trauma or adverse childhood experiences?
Um, I think it depends if the person is an adult, if the person is a child, what kind of how they are developmentally. Um, so I have worked with cases where it was children who had developmental trauma, and then art therapy kind of comes in as a tool for them to build safety in their body and to become comfortable with touch, or to find ways to kind of subconsciously process what happened to them and build a more secure attachment. Um, and definitely, like, it's a very helpful tool for that. When it comes to adults, and I've worked with a couple who have been either diagnosed with cancer or who have also experienced ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences. And our therapy then gives them a tool to first explore or express them. And there's so much that's in our subconscious that doesn't come out. So art almost becomes a tool for them to kind of uncover what's there and then process on it. And I'm not sure what the right word would be, but kind of to reframe the experience for themselves could be one thing that they do in art therapy. Another would be to kind of integrate it or distance it from themselves. Um, yeah, to create new meaning of it. So there are many things that adults or even teenagers or anybody who has the ability to make insight um, will do an art therapy if they have experienced trauma. Sorry, I don't have a more specific answer, but it is a very broad thing because each individual is different and how they would um, experience it, express it, come to terms with it, reflect on it. Everything would be extremely different. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
I will say that art therapy. Sorry, go ahead.
no, no, no. You can keep on going.
Yeah. I think with art therapy, something that's wonderful is that it is very trauma informed. So you are working with the client to build safety in the therapeutic relationship in your therapeutic alliance, but then also eventually for the client within themselves. And you're also giving them different tools to kind of process what's happening internally, but then also externally or somatically um, in the material, and for them to physically see what that might look like instead of it just being words. So, yeah, I definitely think art therapy is such a powerful tool when it comes to trauma work. Yeah.
So, do you collaborate with psychologists or other mental health experts? And if yes, in what ways and at what point do you seek out perspectives and a deeper psychological understanding from them?
Hmm. So I do work in a multidisciplinary team. So I have a psychologist, a behavioral interventionist, a music therapist, social workers who are also licensed to be counselors. So we do work very multidisciplinary, and that's been my experience in the past as well. I know for some art therapists, they do, depending on where you work or wherever you're placed, it depends on how that institution or that private practice or whatever works. For me, my team is extremely multidisciplinary. So we do work or discuss each case together while maintaining client confidentiality, because many of us work with one client at the same time or have worked with them through different phases. Um, I think I generally do seek out advice, consultation from them quite often. we do have multidisciplinary meetings at least once in 2 weeks where we go through our cases. So I think that's really helpful to get different perspectives from everybody and how they would approach it or they think what might be going on with the client and how we can best support them.
So what advice would you give young people who are hesitant to seek help?
I know it's really scary to seek help, honestly. Um, and I can't imagine, I mean, being in their position or anyone's position who's hesitant to reach out for help. I think the hesitancy in itself um, says that maybe there's something to address. Um, there is confidentiality, there are people who are willing to help and truly support. And I don't know if there's advice per se, but I would strongly recommend that there are so many wonderful, wonderful therapists, counselors, people just wanting to support. And, it might feel lonely or you feel like there's so much happening. And of course, like sitting over here and giving general advice isn't something that will help them. But I know that just reaching out to a helpline, reaching out to somebody to talk to them, reaching out to a mental health practitioner, um, it could really help find you the correct support and the correct tools to tackle whatever it is you're going for and to kind of find your inner voice or find a way to make meaning of everything and even reframe your life. So I really, really do hope that each person finds like the tiniest bit of courage to just take that one step to reach out to helpline, reach out to a practitioner and see how that could impact them positively. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Purvi, for your insight and your time. Goodbye.
Awesome. Thank you, Lillian.
Thank you.